we're all tapped into, and, you know, we can coordinate across the, you know, there's just one big database. Not the case. And it starts, and so one way to think about it is that there are two types of political engagement or organizing or whatever you want to call it. There's what we call hard side, which is also called coordinated side activity, which is where we are at Sister District Project, our PAC, which is where we coordinate directly with campaigns. That is often a very small segment of organizations that do that work, because frankly, it's very difficult from a compliance standpoint. And it, you know, if we knew then what we know now, but we love the way that this organization is built. But it is a challenge to work on the hard side directly with campaigns. The flip side, the other way to do it is what's called soft side or independent expenditure. And what that means is that those are organizations and you know, called campaigns, but not the way that we think of campaigns. Those are organizations that do not coordinate directly with candidates. So those are the Planned Parenthoods of the world, League of Conservation Voters, you know, pick your poison on a lot of national organizations. Their electoral efforts are done on the soft side, where they don't coordinate with candidates. They may be talking about candidates. They'll hold phone banks and say, hey, can you vote for Alita Borid in Minnesota? But they haven't talked to Alita. Those two worlds, the hard side and the soft side, they cannot legally talk to each other in terms of what voters they're contacting. So we have absolutely no way of ever knowing who Planned Parenthood is calling for in John Cass's district, or who League of Conservation Voters is calling for in John Cass's district. We can't know. Legally, we're not allowed to know, and the databases do not talk to each other. In addition, on the hard side, which is where we live, right, where we can coordinate with candidates, even there, what happens is that we at, say, John Cass's campaign, we have access to one instance of a database of voters. It's called a VAN committee, but we don't have access to the Biden VAN committee. We don't have access to the congressional candidate who's, you know, where John Cassa is nested in that district. We don't have access to that VAN committee. Legally, we can't. I mean, with the Biden campaign, maybe they could, but typically these are done campaign by campaign. So there's no real way to know. And that's why we all end up calling the same voters over and over and over, is because there's no way legally and infrastructurally to coordinate better. There are some, you know, say grassroots groups and so forth that are able to coordinate and cut lists together, and that's great. But the big institutional players are really caught on what we call one side or another side of the wall. And the wall is the firewall that exists between campaigns and independent expenditure organizations. So hopefully that's helpful in providing a little bit of context about why we can't all just get on the same database. We literally cannot legally, and from an infrastructure perspective, we can't as well. So that is a little bit there. Oh, this is a question that I love that just came from Barbara. Does anyone do any qualitative research to understand at a deeper level how individuals respond to different reach outs? This is a great question, and I'm a huge fan of qualitative research. Mallory, I'm curious for your perspective as well on how qualitative research can inform everything from targeting to larger scale studies.
Yeah, for sure. The short answer is that not enough qualitative research is being done in this space. Qualitative research can let us know why voters are upset that we're contacting them, what they didn't like about the message that we told them. You know, it could tell us what they want to hear from us. It could tell us when they want to hear from us. And so people don't do that nearly as much. There are a lot of groups who do messaging tests. And so that group, it's not quite qualitative, but they do often get impressions from folks, why they, you know, responded in certain ways. We have seen a little bit of essentially market research on voters. I forget where that came out of, but a report that we've seen was very good qualitative research, sort of identifying how effective postcards were for people. Qualitative research ideally would sort of work hand in hand with quantitative research, where the qualitative research uncovers some, potential conclusions or potential strategies, and then the quantitative research can test those, to complement that. But we've also talked about doing some qualitative research, and we might do that eventually. We especially talked about it when we were working in Louisiana and Mississippi, where we felt like we really didn't know a lot about how to talk to those voters. And in those instances, I think qualitative research can be very, very useful.
Yeah. And I would say too, polling is a form of, there's a type of polling, and some of the work that goes into polling is qualitative research in a way, particularly not at the state legislative level, but at the congressional or Senate level, or the presidential level. Pollsters will engage in focus groups with voters to test messaging. That's often how messages get tested in larger campaigns. Not really possible at the state legislative level, because these are really small campaigns, under-resourced, as we all know. But that is a place where qualitative research happens. The other thing I would say about pollsters and all of that is that one of the motivations behind our research agenda and our program here at SDAN is to not be like the pollsters, not be like the political consultants who essentially, to extract money, I mean, that's their job, from campaigns and candidates, and then hide the results of their research behind a paywall, where you have to pay them to get that qualitative information or quantitative information. As Mallory said, we publish the results of all of our studies, even when they're not favorable, especially when they're not favorable, and it's free and open to the public, and is really unusual in that way. I'm not aware of another organization, Mallory, that operates like ours, where we have a full and frank conversation about our research and publish it freely and widely to the public. Even Analyst Institute, they are a fantastic partner and absolutely crucial in this ecosystem, but you have to be a member of the Analyst Institute to access their research. So hopefully that is helpful. And let's see, so there's some really great questions. There's a question here about how do we get voters to vote down ballot more consistently? Best question ever, but conversation over. This is it, right? This is the ball game. I mean, one thing I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to Mallory for her thoughts, is when we analyzed the raw results of the 2020 elections, as I mentioned, the voter file has not come out yet. So what we can't do is a lot of the why the results were what they were. But what we can do right now is some of the what happened. Who voted for, how many votes did this candidate get? How did it compare to the other candidate? That sort of thing. I just pasted in a link to an op-ed that Mallory and I published about this issue. And what I mean to say, and thank you, Mallory, for bringing this up, this is the slide that I had in mind. Wait, no, let's go to the enthusiasm. Yes, this one. So this is a slide that shows what we found in just looking at the raw votes from the 2020 election at the top of the ballot and the bottom of the ballot in the chambers that we worked in. And what we see is that in every single chamber that we worked in, the Republicans running for state leg got a higher percentage of the total vote than Donald Trump. Okay, like that means, if you want to say it a different way, he might have gotten a little bit of coattails from the down ballot Republicans. On the other hand, in only one chamber that we worked in, the North Carolina House, was the opposite true. So meaning that there was a Democratic enthusiasm or awareness gap on the Democratic side that did not exist on the Republican side. This gets at the question that has been raised. How do we get voters down ballot to vote down ballot more consistently? This is the question. How do we close that gap? It's the third column there, the enthusiasm gap or the awareness gap. How do we encourage folks? How do we get these numbers from the negative into what the Republicans have, which is the very last column on the right, which is the positive? They have a gap where their presidential candidate got less percentage of the votes than their state leg candidates in every single chamber that we worked in. So that's the question. And so the answer, and so, you know, I mean, I want to hear Mallory's thoughts as well, but the answer, one answer from my perspective is we need to continue doing the work. What the Republicans have built on their side down ballot has taken decades. As I mentioned yesterday, Paul Weyrich started ALEC in 1973. And they have had a huge and massive and coordinated effort to turn out the vote and to build awareness about state leg on the right that we're just starting here. We're just starting here. And so I think part of the answer there is, you know, how do we do it? We commit to this being a decades-long project that we're way, way behind at. And we commit to doing the work, even when we don't get everything that we, you know, even when we don't win all the things, we continue to do the work. We continue to build out the educate and empower pillar of this program, which is civic education, you know, and we continue to find ways to do that. Mallory, curious for your thoughts on the awareness gap and this set of issues.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of what you said. I think that one of the really important things we need to do is get the message to folks, to voters, that there are good folks to vote for down ballot and they should be voting for them. I think one thing that we often don't consider when we consider the fact that more young people are Democrats is we don't consider the fact that they often don't think that they're well informed. And so people who don't think they're well informed often aren't going to vote for, you know, county commissioner or soil and water supervisor or these positions where they don't know what that person does. Because they feel like they're not informed and they feel like they shouldn't be weighing in. Older people very rarely feel like they shouldn't weigh in when they don't know what they're talking about, right? Like we've all been in a meeting where we heard some people our age spouting off about something that they didn't really know. But we need to be aware that a good part of our constituency are people who are not educated about why they should care about state leg, you know, who their state leg candidate even is, and how that state legislature affects them on a daily basis. And as far as I know, Sister District is the only organization who's entirely dedicated to state legislative races and raising awareness about them. So I really consider this, you know, good evidence in some ways that we are all in the right place. This is where we should be, because no one needed to get more votes for Joe Biden on this graph, right? We needed to get more votes down ballot.
Yeah, 1,000%. There are some really great questions coming through. Also, several questions about polling. So this is a whole set of other concerns. We are not pollsters. We don't engage in polling. And so we don't have any special information. You know, our own research has not involved polling. I mean, we've sat through about 1.5 billion debriefs on this set of issues coming out of 2020. What I can say about polling is, and I know we have Alita in the audience, who is one of our fantastic, inspiring, incredible candidates from 2020 in Minnesota, running for the Minnesota Senate, is that polls, so what we saw in 2016 in terms of polls and how they related between the top of the ballot and state leg, is that in 2016, the polls for Hillary were off, right? But, and the DLCC was, saying this, shouting this in their own ways. The polls at the state leg level in 2016 should have been a blaring red flag, because they did not indicate the kind of support for Hillary and for down ballot Dems that would have been necessary to win. And kind of no one paid any attention to the down ballot polls. going into this year, the thinking was, well, the state ledge polls and the national polls are basically the same this year. That must mean that the polls are right, because in 16 they were wrong down ballot, right? Or they were right, like there was a difference there. Classic case of correlation versus causation turned out to not be the case, right? Because the polls were wrong at both the state ledge level and at the national level in a lot of places. What I can say about poll and why that's the case, I mean, pollsters will say that, Trump voters didn't take polls. The samples were skewed. We didn't get enough people in the sample for it to really be generalizable, right? These were not representative samples. I think that polling is kind of a dismal science in political polling. I've been really surprised at how polls are, how the samples for polls are selected and weighted. They differ really, really significantly from what I would have seen in health sciences research, and probably what Mallory has seen in social psychology research. The methods and the sort of what is acceptable in polling is, in my opinion, of a lower quality than what we would require in, peer-reviewed science and that sort of thing. That's just a general, a difference between the industries. But, I think that there is, as there was in 16, going to need to be significant reckoning about what to do about the polls and how to move towards a situation where polling is more representative, where the people who are being polled are actually more representative of voters who are likely to turn out than they were this year. Mallory, I don't know if you have other thoughts about polling.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add the point that Sandy brought up about the replicability crisis in social science. We're saying that like social science has better methods, but even social science is having a crisis with their methods. So like, just imagine how bad the polling methods are if the comparison is somewhat better methods that are still unreliable.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a question here about ALEC, which I love to see. Is there some effort among progressive organizations to form our own ALEC? I'm hoping it's coming, though. We can be nicer than ALEC. Well, I don't think we should be nicer than ALEC. I think we should be just as ruthless in our goals. I mean, I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way, but they are very focused and strategic, and I admire that very much. There are some organizations that are working on providing legislators with policy stuff. So I saw someone mention the State Innovation Exchange, that also known as SIX. They are there have been numerous predecessors to SIX. So SIX is kind of what a number of organizations in the past are now kind of consolidated into. It has been a bedeviling project on the left. And I think that there are a few reasons why. One thing I would really recommend is the book Dark Money by Jane Mayer, which really goes into a lot of detail about the infrastructure on the right and why it's so different from the infrastructure on the left. The other that I would also recommend is a book by Alexander Hurdle Fernandez called State Capture, which describes the ways in which the infrastructure on the right has taken over, one could say, or eaten away at state legislatures over a long period of time. One of the bottom line from my perspective about the main differences between the right and the left when it comes to policy in the state leg space is that the right has a very streamlined, very small number of organizations that control the flow of information, set the strategy, the policy. It's a very streamlined set of voices that are at the table. The left, we are 1,000 flowers blooming. There is great policy work being done at all of our issue organizations, Planned Parenthood, Sierra Club, pick your poison. They're doing great state level policy work. But, and pick, there is not it is a flat field full of lots and lots of needs and voices and issues on the left, whereas on the right, it's very consolidated and concise. So I'm sure you can imagine it's much easier to set policy and get things done in an environment where there are less cooks in the kitchen than it is in an environment where there are lots and lots of cooks in the kitchen. So there are pros and cons. I think, of course, I'd much rather be on this side where we have a big tent and lots of ideas and lots of voices and very inclusive environment, but it really presents a challenge from a policy perspective. Last thing I'll say on that is that SDAN, you saw the slide earlier and hopefully saw my presentation on the strategy, which includes developing legislators. This is a new area that we're moving into. Less on the policy side for right now and more on the leadership development and network effect side. So one thing that I think is really important that people don't often understand about ALEC is that it's not just about policy. ALEC is not the only one of the reasons in my mind that ALEC is successful in having its policies diffused through state legislatures is because of the network, the strong social and community network that ALEC has built between Republican legislators. It's that trust. Those people feel in community with each other. So you can't just push policies at people, at legislators. You have to, before that, you have to build the trust between them. And so that's the piece that we're working on, not the policy piece. We have amazing resources and friends in the space that have the right policies. It's about getting to the point where you'll listen to those policies and where you trust what's happening in other states with other colleagues. So that's what I wanted to say in that. And it looks like we have what? Are we at time? Oh no,
I think we are.
We are at time. There are still additional questions. I wish that we could do this all day. My email is gabby@sisterdistrict.com and Mallory's is mallory@sisterdistrict.com. Please reach out to us. We are more than happy to chat about this stuff. Please consider checking out the one-pagers on the tactics that we provided earlier. I think it's just sisterdistrict.com/research, right?
Yep.
And if you have questions about the tactics, about the research that we're doing, anything at all, we are here for you. And as I said earlier, you all are our most trusted and treasured research partners. So thank you so much for coming to this panel, and we'll see you later on. Thanks.